Hello everyone. I want to welcome you in what I'm going to present today, and thank you so much for following my previous presentation. Today, I will talk about the book of James. But before I talk about the book of James, allow me to introduce what is known as the general or Catholic epistles. You see, when we speak of Catholic epistles, first of all, I need you to understand we are referring to books like James, First Peter and Second Peter, First John and Second John, Third John, Jude, and even Book of Hebrews sometimes is considered part of this group. Sometimes, so this actually refers to a collection of New Testament letters that are primarily addressed to a broader audience rather than to specific individuals or congregation. So this is what we refer when you talk about general epistles. The designation general or Catholic is derived from the Greek word Catholicos, meaning universal or general, trying to let us know that it reflects the intent behind this letter to address the whole Christian community rather than specific churches or individuals. So when we talk about these general epistles, just understand that it indicates that these writings were intended for a wide-ranging of Christian audience rather than addressing just a particular community or a particular individual. Yeah, so that's the reason they're called general epistles, unlike Paul's letter, which were often written to specific churches like the Corinthians, the Colossians, etc. The general epistles are meant to be read and applied by all Christians across different cultural and social contexts. This is something that we really need to understand, and the issues that you find discussed in these letters, they're actually ranging from ethical behavior to doctrinal integrity that are relevant to all believers, that promotes a sense of collective identity among the Christian population. So you notice that even the use of the term arose early, the use of this term general or Catholic, it arose early in church history, particularly in the collection of these letters into the New Testament canon, where they were recognized that they're significant and they are applicable across the diverse early Christian community. So I hope now you understand why we call them general epistles, general epistles. So as I said, we have James, Jude, First Peter, Second Peter, First John, Second John, Third John, and sometimes they tend to include Hebrew, but mostly are these five. James, Peter, letters of Peter, John, and Jude. So let's move now to James. You see, the book of James is part of the general epistle and is one of the last books to be accepted as authoritative. First of all, you need to understand that it was criticized by early church leaders because of its presentation of the law. It was also criticized by one of the greatest reformers, Martin Luther, because it contradicted. He looked at it just as if it seemed like it contradicts the writing of Paul that one is saved by faith and not by law. Because if you're leading just you're not going deeper, you may think that James is contradicting Paul, but we just see as we move on with what we have in this presentation. So let's just move now and talk about the historical and cultural setting of the book of James. And you need to understand as we deal with this that the Epistle of James is set within the context of the early Christian church during a time of significant social and cultural upheavals. Written to encourage Jewish Christians, the letter addressed the challenges faced by these believers living outside their homeland in the diaspora, primarily in Greco-Roman society that often conflicted with the Christian with the Christian values. So this is something that we really need to understand. But also, the cultural environment was marked by economic disparity, speak of social tensions between the rich and poor, the rising persecution against Christians, particularly Jewish converts. It wasn't easy for them, but also many of the Christians faced marginalization, both as Jews and as followers of Christ, navigating an often hostile environment that required steadfast faith and ethical living. So look now, let's move forward to the issue of authorship. So the author identified himself merely as Jacob, or in Greek, Jakub, a slave of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ, based on James 1 verse 1, my brother. Oh, okay, let me read there. James 1:1, it says, James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ. So traditionally, the letter is attributed to James, the just, the brother of Jesus, who became a prominent leader in the Jerusalem church. While you notice that this is supported, even early church tradition support this from Josephus and Eusebius, they all confirm James' authority and his role as a significant figure in early Christianity. So you also notice that some scholars argue that the letter may have been written by another James or even pseudonymously. The strongest consensus support that James, the brother of Jesus, based on its theme and language, that it was written by James. So that is it. But you notice that this epistle is addressed to the 12 tribes, as you read verse 1, to the 12 tribes in the dispersion. Greetings. So the epistle is addressed to the 12 tribes that are scattered among the nations. So this designation is actually implying that a Jewish Christian audience, and that's the reason we say these are Jews that were living in diaspora. That refers to Jews living outside of Palestine, suggesting that the recipients are primarily Jewish Christians who were likely experiencing persecution and hardship, and they were scattered in different places. And that's the reason we call this the general epistle, because it wasn't just written to a particular church, but to these Christians that were scattered across different places, these Christians who were scattered in different places. So you gotta understand this as we continue with this presentation. I hope you're following. So looking at the data and place of writing, you notice that scholarly opinion generally placed the writing of James in the mid to late 40s, and possibly before the Jerusalem Council that was held in 49 CE. So circumstances and themes that are discussed in the letter suggest that it was authored prior to significant development that affected Jewish and Gentile relationship with the church. And it is believed that James wrote the letter from Jerusalem, where he exercised substantial leadership over the Christian community. Yeah. So that is something that you really need to understand about the date and place of writing. But let's look at the circumstance of the writing of this book. The letter was likely written in response to prevalent issues that the people were facing, these believers were facing, including temptation to conform to worldly values and practices. You see, it serves as an exhortation also to maintain faith and ethical conduct. Speak of economic disparity, speak of social tension between the rich and poor. These are some of the of the issue that you find the rising persecution against Christians. These were the challenges. These Christians were going through persecution also. So the letter was written to encourage them and to give them moral instruction. And then this moves us now to the purpose of the book of James. The primary purpose of James is to exhort believers to demonstrate their faith through works or deeds. This is the primary purpose that that emphasizes that their faith should be demonstrated through words or deeds, that countering any notion that faith can exist without accompanying action. Because some were kind of saying, no, you can just have faith. You don't, yeah, you have faith, no need of work. But this emphasizes the importance of consistency between belief and behavior. Belief and behavior. Emphasis on the importance of consistency between beliefs and behavior, that they have to be consistent. There should be consistency. There should be harmony between belief and behavior. And it also emphasizes that very much, urging readers to persevere through trials, persevere issues such as social injustice. So these were the issues, the main purpose why the book was written, to address those issues of social injustice, particularly the treatment of the poor and the danger of favoring the wealth within the community. You see, he's talking about things of favoritism. And then this moves us to our final discussion, and this is all about the themes of the book of James. So the letter of James incorporates several significant themes, and I'll discuss some of them. The first one is faith and work. Faith and what? And works. So central to the epistle is the relationship between faith and works. And here the epistle underscores that genuine faith manifests itself through actions, through works. So this is often viewed in contrast to what Paul emphasized on justification by faith alone, but is not actually a contradiction. You see, Paul focused on justification by faith, but James moves on the other side, that yes, we are justified by faith, but that faith should be manifested through our actions. The second theme that we have is trials and perseverance. Trials and what? And perseverance. So in this, James advocates for joy in trials as they serve to develop and to develop perseverance and spiritual maturity, especially when you read James chapter 1 verse 2 to 4, where it says, "Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, and let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing." You see? So this perspective promotes worldview that recognizes the positive outcome of suffering. So James actually differs from wisdom when you're reading wisdom 3, 4 to 5. This is not part of what we have in the Bible. But on an essential point, however, stressing that God is not the source of this test, which are rather posed by one's own desire, so which rules and entices the individual. When you're reading James 1, 13 and 14, you'll notice what James says, that let no one says when he's tempted, I'm being tempted by God, for God cannot be tempted with evil, and he himself tempts no one. But each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. So on this point, even Ben Sira's position undergirds James' own. Do not say it was God who led me astray, for God has no need of the sinful. So you may see even what James presents here. If you compare with other other writings, Jewish writings, which were not canonized, they're kind of speaking the same thing that James is trying to present here. That it's not God who is tempting us, but God may allow trials and temptation as a kind of shaping us to become what he wants us to be. I hope you are following. Another theme that we have is wisdom. The letter emphasizes the necessity of seeking divine wisdom, particularly in navigating trials and decision making. We need divine wisdom. And that's the reason in James 1 5 it says, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given him. You see? So that is something, wisdom. If you want wisdom, pray for it. James talks about it. Another theme that we have is this theme of social justice. Social justice, and in social justice, a strong focus on social ethics is evident, particularly the condemnation of favoritism toward the wealth and the call for justice for the poor. When you're reading James 2 1 to 9 and even 5 1 to 6, James stresses the call for equitable treatment, that people should be treated with equal treatment and compassion within the community. And then you have another theme, which is the control of speech. And James, in fact, takes much time in chapter 3, verse 1 to 12, speaking about how people need to control their speech. And this letter goes deeper into this topic concerning the power of the tongue, highlighting the need for careful speech to avoid discord and harm. This reflects a wisdom literature approach, powering the teachings from the Sermon on the Mount that also speak about this, how people need to control their tongue. But also another theme that we have is the theme of practical religion. So James calls his readers to a form of religion that is active and lived out, rather than merely theoretical or ritualistic. A ritualistic religion. As you read James 1:22, he actually talks about this practical religion, James 1:22, that but be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourself. You see this point. So this involves practical acts of service and care, particularly for the marginalized So we need to really reach out to them. It speaks about the widows, it speaks about the orphans, those who are in need. Our religion has to be practical, and it talks about that practical side of it. And another theme that we have is prayer and healing. Prayer and healing. James addresses prayer as a foundational component of faith, encouraging believers to seek God's wisdom and guidance in all matters, as it says in James 1 and in verse 5, that if any one of you lack wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given. So that is something that we have. It discusses the power of prayer, especially in the context of healing. This presents a theological insights into the relationship between faith, prayer, and divine intervention in believers' life. So, in summary, I can just say the Epistle of James provides valuable insights into the life of the early church, addressing the struggles of Christian believers to live out their faith authentically amidst the external pressures and internal challenges. And the themes presented encourage believers to cultivate maturity, ethical behavior, and active faith as central tenets of the Christian identity. Thank you for watching and welcome to my next video. Bye bye.